thing.
One last thing I wanted to touch on before I let you go, because I know I've been dragging you through the ringer here, but you mentioned before, and I thought this was interesting, something I never thought about before. I think about this when it comes to insurance, but not when it comes to real estate and lending. You mentioned solar panels.
Yes.
So when I talk to customers, I'm like, we have to make sure we have the coverage on the home to cover the solar panels. So that way, if they get damaged, we can fix them. Or if the house is a loss, you'll get those replaced. And I had not thought about it, but you mentioned that most of the time people don't own the solar panels outright on the home.
Right. They're making payments on them. They haven't because they're fairly new.
Right.
And I know that a lot of people are getting them now because of the cost of electricity and we don't know what's happening with all of that. So
right. And a lot of people think some people might buy them because they feel like they're doing their they're doing their good deed
Right.
of reducing emission costs, or some people are doing it because there's tax incentives. Lots of different reasons why people do it.
Right.
And then they spread it out on a loan.
Correct.
But that loan isn't tied to the house.
No. And so typically what we're finding is either the buyer takes over the loan of the solar panel. So they have to
Assume it.
Assume it. Yep, correct. They assume the loan, or it gets paid off at closing.
Okay.
Which it depends on the whole transaction, what makes more sense for the seller and the buyer. And we would negotiate that during the contract timeline.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's becoming more common.
Yeah, I would imagine
into
it does.
Yeah, a little bit more. I'm surprised how often now.
So that's something, a good little tip, I guess, for people to think about when they're looking at homes.
Yeah.
If it has solar panels, you got to ask some additional questions to know how is that going to affect the price of the house?
Exactly.
Or am I going to be taking on more debt by buying this house with solar panels? Or are we going to make sure that they get that paid off and I'm not taking any responsibility for it?
Right.
But be careful that gets addressed.
Right. And it does need to be addressed at the seller side originally to find out what they can, if they can afford to pay it off at closing, and if they can, if it's going to have to be assumed.
Right.
Yeah. So that I would think that needs to be disclosed with the listing up front,
Right.
so that buyer knows. But that I definitely ask those questions. Yeah.